From Gods of Egypt to Black Panther. From Nine Kisses to Avengers Infinity War. From CSI New York to Into Five Bloods. Not Into Five Bloods, just call it Defy Bloods. We are honoring the life, the historic career of Chadwick Boseman all this month on Graphic. Welcome to Popaholics, the show about hot takes, hotter than hot tasty pancakes. Chris, thank you so much for your hard work and your animation there. I'm your host, Christian Cady, and I'm joined, as always, by just one of my best friends.
Just Brian Dupree this week. Chris sorely missed, but he will be back next week, thank goodness.
Yeah, we said, hey, we're going to review a movie about baseball. And he said, oh, I got something. I gotta go.
Put me on the bench, coach.
So this is Popaholics, again, the show about hot takes, hotter than hot tasty pancakes. And what do we talk about? Well, we theme our months. And as you heard from that ridiculous opening, our theme this month is honoring the late, the great Chadwick Boseman, as it is 1 year since his tragic passing. And so we're going to be reviewing, starting with 42, we're going to be reviewing some of his back catalog and talking about some of the movies that made him the great actor that he was. Brian, so happy to have you for this conversation. Before we get into 42, I do want to remind our listeners that you should subscribe to the podcast. If you're new to the YouTube channel, please subscribe to that. We've got a link tree to the audio feed as well as our social media and all that stuff. So please join us there for more conversations. And we're doing another video review, which is really exciting. You get to see our faces. That's what they look like. But let's jump into it. We're talking 42 because we're talking about the late, the great Chadwick Boseman. So first, I want to catch your pulse on kind of looking back at Chadwick Boseman's career. What are your thoughts?
So interestingly enough, 42 was kind of a breakout point for Chadwick Boseman, and it was also the first movie that I saw him in. So I was thinking back on this, and I'm fairly certain that I saw this with my dad, and I can't remember if we saw it in the theater or not, but I grew up playing baseball for the majority of my life through high school and even some club ball in college. So that was my main sport throughout the course of my life since I was about 8 years old. So, and my dad coached me throughout a good portion of that as well. So we definitely have a connection with baseball. And yeah, so I saw this movie and remember really enjoying it. We both really liked it. You brought it up and we'll talk about it more. We saw the last movie. I think it may be the only movie I ever saw, and this is a bit tangential, but 42 is kind of in the same realm of movie as Remember the Titans. And I also saw this movie with my dad and my grandfather. So sports movies and my dad and grandfather, kind of a thing for us. But yeah, since then, obviously, he became a staple with Black Panther. He's in the new Marvel pantheon, and it just seemed like he was going to continue going up and becoming not only a even more incredible actor and showing his range there, but just in the cultural zeitgeist, in making in the future. I'm sure he would have done production things, just pushing for new voices to be out there and for good roles for people of color and people generally. So yeah. It doesn't feel like a year, obviously we covered The Five Bloods, the month of his passing, which was about 2 months after the movie came out. And then late last year, we got Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is undeniably, for me, one of his best performances. I mean, the man was absolutely incredible, and it's a heartbreaking performance. If you haven't seen that, that's on Netflix. But yeah, it really does not, it just feels like yesterday that this happened. And it's so obvious, even coming back to 42, that this was someone with real, sincere talent and screen presence that, is sorely missed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was just, he reminds me, obviously he's a little older, but with the trajectory of his career, he's really got kind of a, Anton Yelchin and James Dean type of career where, I mean, he did a lot more content because he started off early doing the TV circuits, doing a lot of the cable broadcast stuff like Law and Order and CSI. and getting like bit roles there, and eventually like jumping pretty quickly. He's Jackie Robinson in 42. He's James Brown in Get On Up. He is the Black Panther in Black Panther.
Thurgood Marshall as well.
In Marshall, like the dude immediately became just a man that could lead,
an icon,
regardless, in embodying a lot of historical characters as well as fictional characters that are based off popular IP. So I really didn't have a lot of experience with, like many people, Chadwick Boseman until seeing Captain America: Civil War, in which I thought he was super great in that. Like, he immediately stood out as bringing his own specific energy and really embodying that character very well. And although, we reviewed Black Panther when we went through all the Marvel movies, I think one of the biggest things that's super sad about his experience in the MCU is that although Black Panther was the titular role, it really was more about Warmonger. And I was so stoked to see where the character would go in future adaptations in Black Panther 2. And, for as much as that's what he's known for, and he's very good in that, I don't think it highlights some of the stuff that we'll see as we go through this month, and really can highlight what an incredible tour de force that he was. And
such range. And I looking back, it's like I missed these pivotal roles of historical figures as well. So I'm just so excited to dive in and, relish in his career.
And I'm not one to get too America rah-rah, okay? But I will say, one of the things that I also love is that he's from, like, North Carolina. And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but, we're from the South here, and it's weird to have pride for the South. It's usually tied up in a lot of crap we're going to talk about. But, like, it's where I'm from. It's where we're from, me and Brian. And, there's some great things here, casseroles and fried chicken. Listen, you're welcome. We did that. There's a lot of things to be proud about. But one of the things that I love about his career is where he's from. Not that that was the only thing that made him, but so many of what we call, like, lead actors that are black are from England. And nothing wrong with England, or nothing wrong with English people. But so many of these, like, titular American figures are sometimes, like, portrayed as English actors, because they come up through that kind of the theater circuit there. So I'm really, like, proud that, especially for something like Jackie Robinson, this is like a homegrown guy from the South that's playing a homegrown guy from the South. It's a very kind of American story, as we'll talk about. And again, I don't get too rah-rah America, but it's so great to see an American actor of this caliber that was coming up. And again, it just leads to, like, we're going to keep repeating this, but it's very, very tragic, because you just know, like, just warming up, just getting started. So it's definitely a huge loss. But what I'm glad is he made quite a few films, and we're going to talk about some of them. And so we're going to start with 2013's 42. That is from the trailer of 42. 42, let me pull up my notes here. 42 is directed by Brian Helgeland. You might pronounce that Helgeland? Helgeland? This is
Helgeland? I'm not sure.
Helgeland, yeah. Brian Helgeland. Director of Mystic River, as well as some other very, very critically acclaimed stuff. Written and directed by him. Score by Mark Isham. The budget of $40 million. It grossed $97.5 million. And I got to say, $40 million is a lot of money. My brother Bobby, who's been on the podcast before, always makes fun of me when I say millions of dollars is a small amount of money. But in, like, big Hollywood, it's a mid-sized movie. It's something we don't get a ton of anymore. This is a great looking $40 million movie. It looks fantastic for that budget. It's It's really quite beautiful. It grossed $97.5 million, so a success, and it stars Chadwick Boseman as Jackie Robinson, Harrison Ford as Branch Rickey, Andre Holland as Wendell Smith, Christopher Meloni as Leo Durocher, Christopher Meloni, excuse me, you may know as the dude from Law & Order SVU. John C. McGinley as Red Barber, who you may know as Dr. Cox from Scrubs. Toby Huss, Lucas Black, who you may know as that one Southern guy from the Tokyo Drift movie and other movies. Alan Tudyk as Ben Chapman, who you may know as the robot from Rogue One.
Steve the Pirate.
So many who's in this. It's a really great cast. My first shout out is as soon as you see like Alan Tudyk pop up, you see McGinley pop up, you're like, ugh, I'm in the right spot.
John C. McGinley, I'm always going to be happy when he pops up on screen. Like, that man is just pure charisma.
I don't want to get too side tangent, but he does like the old transatlantic, like,
the voice
radio broadcaster, and he's perfect. He's like, comes up to Stop Chat in Pittsburgh, and like, he sounds like Bugs
and the
Bunny.
Phrases, the just absurd phrases that he's making too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a highlight for sure. So what are we going to be talking about? Our overall thoughts on 42. We will be spoiling the movie. It is based on a true story of Jackie Robinson. So, you know, at your own pace, if you haven't seen the movie, you clicked on.
He made it to the majors, folks.
He did. He was one of the most important people to join the majors in the history of American baseball. We're talking about our favorite moments. We're going to talk about kind of this movie's rosy approach to race relations, which, you know, I might fight back on a little bit. I know I've posed this question here, but I know that's something we're going to talk about a lot when it comes to this style of film. And then we'll wrap up with our final thoughts. So let's delay no further. Brian, I'm really curious to hear, what did you think of 42? You had seen it before, correct? You had seen it
I had.
With your dad. So this was a second rewatch. So I'm really interested to hear your first impressions when you saw it and what you think now. Starting, I know I'm asking you like 3 questions in a row as I'm talking. But to be the very beginning of where we started, when did you see it? You saw it in theaters in 2013?
I believe I saw it in theaters. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so I'm very interested in your first impression and then kind of the rewatch here.
So this was 2013, right? I wasn't really watching movies critically at this point in my life. So having grown up playing baseball, obviously knowing Jackie Robinson and having a vague understanding of the history, I was kind of in for this movie before I even got there, right? And I remember really enjoying it, you know, growing up watching Harrison Ford in Star Wars, Indiana Jones, him being there, an easy sell as Branch Rickey, and Chadwick Boseman, you know, doing a great job as Jackie Robinson. So I remember really enjoying it. So coming back to it this time, I think it's a good movie, but I don't think it's an incredible movie. It's just the kind of thing where it feels perfectly created to allow people watching it today to have an understanding of what happened while still being comfortable with themselves today and not necessarily feeling complicit or trying to bring this message into the modern day, if that makes sense, for better and for worse. I think ultimately it's a very hopeful movie with some really solid performances. My biggest pros are the relationship between Chadwick Boseman as Jackie Robinson and his wife, Nicole, played by Nicole Beharie. I think their relationship is ridiculously sweet. And the whole time, the way she's invested in the game and watching throughout her getting pregnant and the whole bit, it's really solid. Do you want to step in here, Christian?
Yeah, it's solid. I feel like the writing is, his relationship is where it's probably the most lazy, because he says you have my heart about 100 times, which is very cute. It's a cute sentiment. I'm gonna put that in the back pocket, throw that the old ball and chain occasionally to spice up the romance. It's a good line. It kind of feels like it starts with a bang. It goes up. It literally starts. Sorry, they have a baby in the beginning. It starts really dynamic, and it continues kind of at that same plateau, I think. I feel like the relationship's never challenged. So for me, the relationship part's maybe a weak point for me.
Okay. This gets to my ultimate issue with the movie. I feel like the only person with a pseudo arc in the movie is Branch Rickey, which gets into kind of my issues with what the movie may be trying to say on some level, which I want to get to once we get to that.
Of course.
But yes, I think the beginning of their relationship is definitely strongest, but totally agree that it's not tested in any real way in terms of their character arcs. I think the relationship between, although it's not super overdone, between Harrison Ford as Branch Rickey and Christopher Meloni as Leo Durocher, they're just like short to the point phone calls. I really liked that relationship, and I just had fun watching them on screen together. And
it's also a point where you come to find out the movie feels like it was overwritten to fit a screenplay. And then there's some decisions where you're like, I don't get it. One of those decisions is like dropping him out of the cast kind of less than halfway through the movie. But then come to find out that the movie is, and we'll get into more of this, is very accurate to what happened, which is really fascinating for a lot of different reasons that we'll talk about. But like that's one where I'm like, I think you just rewrite it and keep him there, you know?
They just bring in this old guy who's just kind of like, okay. I guess people who like love old baseball maybe know who this is, but it really was, nothing there.
Old
and
guy
the
that
scene
shows
he's
up
introduced is like hard to watch almost.
He shows up and he's like, I'm not going to get in your way. I'm just here because there needs to be somebody here.
Right.
Play ball. Oh, hey, Jackie. I like you. And that's it. I was very disappointed by that kind of arc in the story. But again, maybe it was just being very accurate to be like, no, he didn't really play a big role. He was just like an old timer that came in, kept the wheels moving. Okay.
So I just think this is the kind of movie where you know exactly where it's going to go to some degree. You know, you brought up a Bill Burr bit about this sort of movie that has the stereotype characters, and they very much are here in this movie. Everyone you expect.
Stop right now and search for Get Out of the Pool, Bill Burr, and watch that bit. And the whole time I was like, yeah, that's this movie, where it's just overly... but, you know, again, seems like all the stories were like, oh, this is too much. Like, looking it up, it's like, nope, that should
actually happen.
That should happen.
Yeah, there are a few points that they changed. But yeah, to its credit, as something that serves as a pseudo-historical set of events, documentation of events, I think it works on that level. In terms of, okay, now that I'm thinking about it, I think the strongest relationship, I think the Branch Rickey stuff with Jackie is pretty good. But some of my favorite stuff is with Jackie Robinson with Andre Holland as Wendell Smith, the journalist / driver for him.
Yep.
That stuff's really solid, and getting the perspective from him where Jackie is coming from a totally different place outside of the league and kind of an into seeing the other oppression around the professional game that Jackie really wasn't involved in, as well as one of my favorite scenes that we'll bring up later. But in terms of plot, it was hard for me to get super excited about the stakes of this movie, but it was a very much an enjoyable ride. And what I texted you? It has maybe more earnestness than it needs. It's just feeling like so goodwill, so trying to be like a message type movie that it can be a bit over the top, maybe like too saccharine sweet. You know? Yeah,
I mean, it's essentially a movie about how American exceptionalism and idealism and baseball can, fix racism. That's essentially...
It might even just be saying money can fix it, which is what I'm very confused about.
There is some of that, for sure.
Very strange, element that I didn't catch the first time.
It's funny because I actually think that this movie, through the right context, can actually say something super important about prejudice, but we'll get to that later. And I think that's what ultimately worked, because I found a way, because the whole time I was watching it, I was texting you going like, I love this movie, because I love Remember the Titans, which is a very much like rose tinted, Get Out of the Pool sketch where it's just like people are just like, we don't like black people, and then people be like, no, give them a chance, and someone being like, I don't know if I like black people, and then by the end he's like, I think I like black people, and it's just it seems like an oversimplification sometimes of race relations,
right?
But what's crazy is that you have these moments and you're like, that is so over the top, and then I looked it up and like so much of this movie happened exactly the way they portray it, and come to find out, like, I actually was super fascinated by the story because I didn't know a lot about Jackie Robinson. Baseball is definitely your wheelhouse, Brian. I didn't know a lot about Jackie Robinson, so I was immediately fascinated. I was like, oh, let me figure out how this story like actually played out. A lot of the biographers, the family of Jackie Robinson himself, in interviews that he gave, really shed light that the context of this is very true to the story that the family, that sports historians, as well as Jackie Robinson, were saying about kind of what transpired. And a lot of it happened exactly how it did, which was crazy because it feels so cliche at this point. But maybe it's a little bit of the chicken and egg problem, right? This was such an important moment that other artists kind of captured the spirit of it and put it into context later, right? So it could be one of those things occurring. And I know they were trying to make the movie forever, so it could have been in the development before even Remember the Titans, which is a very good, I think, parallel to the style of movie. It also feels, it feels very Hollywood. And in a kind of a good way for the type of movie and type of story that it is. It is a very American exceptionalism type of story of acknowledging problems that were there, right? It's like it is showing, white Americans not accepting him in baseball and the struggle of gaining that acceptance through just being exceptional, right? So it is very much of that oeuvre, which Jackie Robinson 100% was. So again, I'm conflicted by how you would tell this story today versus how the man himself would have wanted it kind of embodied. All that being said, I think the cast is great. I think the performances across the board are super solid. They're over the top, but in a way that just fits the genre so well. Harrison Ford this has to be top Harrison Ford performance for me because
I almost want to laugh every time he talks though, because he's like putting on a voice and really like doing a lot of movement when he talks.
I'm sorry. There's moments where he goes like, do you think God likes baseball? Because when you get to heaven, you're going to have to ask him why you didn't let a Negro play it. And he's not going to have, I don't think that's going to be sufficient. Yes, sign me up. Yes, 100%. Were you not entertained? Brian?
I definitely was. He's doing a lot. He's doing a lot.
He's doing the most I've ever seen Harrison Ford do. And so for that, I'm grateful.
No, I think it's a great performance as well.
So that's great. Chadwick Boseman, just super confident and like he just is so in his own, like in the skin. He's just like there, and it's the presence, and you're like immediately like, that's why they were like Black Panther 100%. You have to watch 5 seconds of this movie to be like,
100, yeah,
that dude leads. Go ahead.
We heard it in the trailer, but the moment when Wendell Smith is kind of trying to prep him for the other journalists asking him questions, and he's like blowing him off, not having thought about it. When he just turns on for the cameras there, I was like, oh man, this guy, it's like he's got it. He goes from this completely reserved, and then he just does this punchline, and it kills. It's like, okay, yes, he's got it.
Yeah, I appreciated how kind of reserved he was, because it makes the moments, one of the moments that's famously not a true moment where he kind of breaks down and hits the bat. It's the Oscar moment. It really is, like, because this movie is very by the numbers type of like, Hollywood type of thing. Where he breaks down and he kind of is like at the end of his rope, and Rickey comes in and goes like, you gotta do it, kid. You gotta do it for the game.
He says, "Your medicine, Jackie," which is a beautiful line, I will say. And the way that scene is shot, and speaking of like pure Hollywood, where there's the beautiful light coming down the long hallway, incredible stuff. One of my favorite moments before we got to favorite moments. It's beautiful.
Is gorgeous. And I think he builds up to that really well, because you just see him like kind of like
taking it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's where in film you have to, whereas in a novel or in lesser films or films that are doing something different, but you have to like internalize a narration, a voiceover of like, I was feeling very angry,
Yeah.
This is the work that you'd have to do narratively. And
speaking of Harrison Ford, the Blade Runner method.
Exactly. where he's able to internalize that so well, and that is not easy to do. And he's not in the best script. And I think that's what like helps elevate the picture as a whole. I think all the actors do that, but just obviously the titular Jackie Robinson, number 42 himself, really brings it and embodies what I think is great, which is all the people are invested in. Oh man, Rickey has one of my favorite moments too. We'll have to save that. But
okay.
I think overall it's super great, and I love the moment we get Lucas Black in there. I
Okay,
love
Lucas
him
Lott,
in this movie.
one of the most perfect pieces of casting ever. I'm gonna drop it down here. I was like, he is that guy. That's Lucas
he is
Lott.
he's not a 17-year-old high school exchange
No,
student.
he's not the Drift King. No, I'm
No,
sorry.
he's 30 some odd years old playing baseball. 1946. It's perfect. He's from Kentucky.
Getting called a carpetbagger. Just
and he just has this look about like, what's a carpetbagger? Which is exactly where
we all want to know. Yeah.
So, it all feels so fake. And really, my appreciation for this movie skyrocketed when I found out that so much of it wasn't, because it really is just really, it's one of like the few really true American stories. And it gave me, I know, again, not rah-rah American, it gave me the hope that our country could be a better place.
It's like I just turned on the Olympics afterwards.
Well, don't even get me started. It really did. And I love, I'm sorry, I love that feeling. I love feeling like things can get better. It's a good feeling. I texted Brad.
No, it's hopeful. The movie is ultimately a beacon of hope. It definitely is that.
Yeah, and it executes that well. I will say the worst part of the movie is that it just abruptly ends. It's so strange. It's the strangest.
Well, they don't win the pennant, so there's like you can't really build up. It's like they kind of have to build up to a pseudo climax.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the most.
Or they do win the pennant. Excuse me, they don't win the World Series.
I'm the person that'll rag on a movie for being way too long. Again, I'll hear the premise of the movie, and as soon as I hear that runtime is like 2.5 hours, like Jungle Cruise or whatever, I'm like, ooh, bad call.
But
Bad call on that one. You're out. Keep it in baseball territory. But this movie, I could have watched another half hour because I loved all the characters. I loved how old-fashioned Hollywood it was. It just was just like, I was like, I want to watch this with my dad. And then I want to tell him why I think it's relevant today and put things in perspective, which we'll get to. But before we do that, Brian, I do have a question. There's not a lot of it. I really actually think it's less than Remember the Titans, where it actually focuses on the sport. But what do you think of the baseball elements? You're a former baseball. You played baseball the entire time I knew you. You played baseball in college. What did you think of the baseball that was happening on screen?
I think it's pretty good. Like you said, there's not all that much. I think what it definitely gets right is how frustrating runners can be for pitchers when they're on the mound. Because I was a former pitcher, and with someone like Jackie Robinson, it is just not fun to have to focus on people on the bases who are just
some PTSD with seeing his shaky legs of like,
oh
come on, dude, just let me pitch the ball.
I've pushed down a lot of the stress from former baseball times, but yes, it definitely brought back a lot of memories of having to stare people down on the bases, and just the sort of, there really is like a team rivalry thing. So I know this is something that didn't actually happen, but when Jackie Robinson gets beamed, it's like, as a pitcher, if someone throws at one of your guys,
he did get beamed.
It wasn't in the head. Yeah,
it wasn't in that. He blocked it,
and the team didn't storm the mound afterwards. But this sort of camaraderie and this idea of like, you hurt our own, we're gonna get back at you for it, is very true to all levels of sports, and baseball in particular. Everyone.
This is what sports does.
This is it. There's so much testosterone.
When you need to fix the other, what you do, like when people hate others for how they're different, you create a different other.
This is Watchmen, the the graphic novel, Ozymandias status. But I thought the baseball was good. It was entertaining enough. I think baseball is already what most people consider to be a boring sport. So I think showing the amount they did was smart, and focusing in on how fast Jackie was and his specific moments, even things like, you're not allowed to do this anymore, but the way he would steal home and just deck the catcher, I was just like, this is amazing. Like, baseball should be like this, like full contact. But yeah, I really enjoyed just seeing him get into the minds of the pitchers. I think that was definitely well done.
Yeah, and while we're on that topic, let's move on to favorite moments. I have to say, because Jackie Robinson himself, for those who don't know, was a world-class athlete. Like, he earned letters in college at UCLA in track, basketball, I believe football, and in another sport. He also played golf and tennis, and from everybody's accounts was very good at those sports as well. So the man was just an insane athlete, and baseball apparently wasn't like his best sport, which is so crazy to think about.
Wild.
That his like third class sport. He was a very, very famous player and very successful.
MVP or like a Hall of Fame player.
Yeah, and not
what is
yeah, he was Rookie of the Year, which is crazy. Just to think that a man that it wasn't his first sport came in with all the prejudice against him, like all people wanting him to fail, and just succeeding in such a powerful way. So just an incredible athlete. I love the scene of him learning first base. Because they put him on that spot and he's like not good, but you see this progression of how he learns.
That is a really good scene. Yeah.
Sorry,
continue.
No, it's one of my favorite moments because it's juxtaposed with the petition signing as well, and it's just this perfect parallel between the opposition against him and actually him coming into something that he wasn't comfortable doing, but him having the patience and what you need as an athlete, which is a lot of stamina, being able to physically do this over and over again. And in drills, that is really the most stamina you put out, like a game of baseball, Brian, unless you're a pitcher, right? Because that really wears down your one specific part of your body pretty hard. But most positions in baseball, playing a baseball game is like little spurts of lots of energy. You can end a baseball game and be like, I'm gonna get a snow cone, I'm good to go. It isn't soccer, for God's sakes. It's not like I have burned 16,000 calories just in 90 minutes. But
I will say running bases, people underestimate, like, it's kind of deceiving,
sprinting,
but running around from home to, around the whole set of bases is the length of a football field.
Sure.
Just 90 feet per. So it's kind of deceptively short. So if you're doing a double or triple, that's a good bit of running.
and you're cutting on the ankles too. I mean, you're
exactly.
Yeah. So or rounding, I guess, is probably the better way to do it. So what's cool about that scene though is that is where the most athleticism in baseball, in my limited opinion or limited knowledge of baseball, I played Little League and was like, I just want to eat Butterfingers. Those drilling it and getting that down is really where the athletics come into play in baseball, and seeing that and being able to overcome frustration, that is like that literally shows his athleticism, number one, and his ability to be good at pretty much anything he did physically, and also his character of being like, I'm put in a spot I don't want to be in, and I'm having to figure it out, and just slowly seeing him get better, seeing those first dynamics of the coach, or I guess he's just the batting coach is probably his,
the assistant coach probably.
That's assistant coach. Yeah, he's hitting it at him and he's just joking with them. This guy isn't trying to throw any shade his way. He's just literally like, this is how you get better, boy. And like just going back and forth and seeing like that team sport thing, seeing Jackie Robinson's character, his physical ability, him getting better, paralleled with the challenges that are coming ahead. I just thought that was excellent storytelling and a great scene.
You're selling me on it. Yeah, I think maybe I was a little too harsh, because this actually is a solid arc for him coming to terms with obviously the racial animus that's ever present, and adapting to going from shortstop to second base to first base, which is really, in terms of baseball, shortstop and second baseman are like the prima donnas on the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are, aside from like, the pitcher is like running things, but short and those are like coveted positions. So going to first base, that's a really astute pickup there. That's solid.
Yeah, I know baseball. What can I say, Brian?
No, you got it in a way that I didn't. So nailed it.
I had to watch a lot of sports, so I get sports sometimes. So what? Going into that's one of my favorite moments, just for like embodying what's really working well in this movie. What are some of yours?
All right, one of the top ones. When Wendell has to wake him up in the middle of the night because the presumably racist mob is going to come attack the house that he's staying at. And we just see Boseman completely defeated and looking so sad. And they're driving, they pull up in front of a bar and they're stopped behind a car, and these white dudes start looking at him funny. Wendell pulls off real fast and then fills him in on why they had to leave. And Boseman being relieved that it was just about his life being in danger because he thought he was kicked off the team. I was like, this is sports. Like, this is so true to ball players. And, and it's such a great character moment between them. You have a strange sense of humor. But yeah, I just, the tension and the release there, I thought was one of the best, just like character and kind of comedic almost moments in the movie, even though it's one of the highest stakes moments too, in terms of him being in danger.
It's funny, we just watched Space Jam, and LeBron delivers the line like, "I ain't a movie star, I'm a ball player." We get that same line from Chadwick, and it works so much better because it's him being like asked to, step into a role of like, "Hey, you're the first black person from the Negro League to play in American baseball in the major leagues. Like, what do you think?" And he's like, "I'm here to get paid. I just play ball." I was like,
yes,
there's a difference between an athlete like acting and an actor acting as an athlete. One line reading works just a little bit better.
No, that's definitely a fair comparison. Okay, so it's something that we've talked about previously in Django Unchained, but this history of attributing like pointing to physical differences to justify racism. We get the scene with the announcers who's talking about, oh, black people always have an advantage because they're longer heel bone. And Jackie hits a home run and the guy turns to him and says, "Was that because of his heel bone, Bob?" Which was just absolutely
And then hilarious. He's typing and he's like, heel bone. Heel bone. So good.
That was a great moment. Lucas Black is Pee Wee Reese, just coming and throwing his arm around Jackie Robinson and finding that was a real moment too. That is one of the strongest in the movie.
And looking up and saying like, "I want them to know," and I was like, "Yeah, that's oof."
It was solid stuff. Yeah. So the fact that that's just heartwarming that even back then, you presume that most white people have this real racial animus and hatred towards black people at the time in the country. So the fact that someone who was well-known, well-paid, a star in baseball did this, and this gets into the kind of the things about, I think, even though it's true, the movie focuses a lot on the white people, the white people's growth in accepting Boseman as a player and a person.
Sure.
And this is on that line, the guy who gets traded off the team to Pittsburgh. At the end, they come back to him and he says it again. It's just so funny. So silly. But yeah, I think that and the overdone "your medicine, Jack," though, that scene is still, even though it's overdone, it's like you can't help but get caught up in it.
That is the scene though, and like even before that, like that entire like 15 minutes, the
lead up to
the Alan Tudyk just like, "Hey, we need you to be climax. A racist asshole," and Alan Tudyk being like, "You found your man."
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he says the N-word more than like a Tarantino flick. It's crazy. And just Tudyk isn't like the most handsome man, but the way he carries himself in that scene too, he just embodies disgusting,
Yeah, no, he's just, you could tell he's just a deeply horrible person.
Yeah, like if I found out that he had like a Heath Ledger style breakdown afterwards from it, I wouldn't be surprised because of how much he does that role, exactly how that role needs to be done. I love Alan Tudyk, but I was like, ugh, God, I can't imagine having to do, because he's just unrelenting and so.
And even the interview afterwards, I think he eventually apologized and got kind of blackballed from the game justifiably.
Yeah.
But the interview he does afterwards, where he's like,
cancel
I called
culture,
Joe DiMaggio this and that, and they don't care about it, just saying all the other racist things that are
I called Joe DiMaggio a wop, whatever. It's after the game, it's fine.
Like,
it's
they
cool.
don't care. And it just feels like these are the same. It's just that kind of stuff is just like, wow, yeah. There's that mentality is very present still.
And then the liberal media canceled them. Can you believe it?
I know.
These woke assholes. They're the worst. They're the worst.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I love everything with the dude from Law and Order. It's so good. Christopher Meloni.
Oh, yeah. The Bible says a few things about adultery too. Has a few things to say about adultery too.
When he comes in and does like the hey, like he wakes him up with the pans and he's like cut the shit moment. I was very sad to see him leave the scene because I love me some. I forget what his name is in Law and Order. I think it's like starts with an S.
Stabler?
Yes! Got it. Thanks, Brian, for being much smarter than me. Everything with Harrison Ford. The moment that got me to that, I remember the Titans like strong side, left side, strong side, was the the moment where it's so set up and it's so overwritten. Okay, I get that. I'm gonna admit that it's like not technically a good scene, but it's a good performance and the sentiment is real, and it made caveats aside, when Chadwick Boseman goes like, why did you bring me here? Why am I here in this role? And I know this taps into like your biggest problems with this movie, right?
It does.
And I get it. I get that. I truly understand it. But like basically saying like, I'm trying to make up for like when I didn't do enough. And that's a true sentiment, right? And I think Harrison Ford delivers that line really well. And that I understand it's cliche and it's maybe oversimplified, but it shows when like common interest and when you really like when you're not, I don't know, when, like the line is, you made me love baseball again in your baseball movie, like, and it's about race. I'm sorry, it's like it's very touching, and you have that scene. It was interesting because before the big game starts, I think it's before the main game. It's before one of them. Towards the end of the movie, there's a scene when the national anthem's playing, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of time spent in that moment listening to the national anthem and going around and looking at the different people in the stands. And
the huge shot of all the white uniforms, all the white players, and just Jackie Robinson there. It's like a shot where you see the whole team. It's like, wow, stark cinematic stuff.
Yeah, and it embodied the fact that what would help motivate a lot of people to say like, okay, I think it's time, was World War II, because so many black soldiers served on behalf of America and came back and said like, hey, my friends died for this country. I risked my life, and like I deserve my own pizza place. Like I deserve to open a business. I deserve to, we deserve to play in these segregated sports, and that's what started breaking down what was happening. So seeing that was really interesting because to this day, as we transition into, does this add rose-tinted glasses to this time? To this day, I look at that, I'm like, people are still complaining when people, like, we used baseball and we used, the American flag and such an American sport, a sport that we invented, baseball, to like make a difference and show like, yeah, we can look past racial stereotypes. And still to this day, like that scene stuck out mostly because, there's people in this country that are listening to that national anthem and getting on a knee respectfully to say, hey, I want to draw awareness to a problem, and people aren't like okay with that. And I'm like, that was the same sentiment of people watching him in the stands, putting his heart on his hand, like just participating. Like him just participating was a problem at the time. And I think that's where we can draw actual real parallels to the current day, because that shit's still real in more ways than one. So that stuck out to me as not as, it's a great cinematic, but as far as like real, like same present parallels. But do you feel like this movie puts rose-tinted glasses on racism?
So to your point about Alan Tudyk, it's like we get some clear examples of fairly realistic racism, in as much as we can say that speaking today, right? The team, getting together to like most of the people on the Dodgers getting together to, I don't know if there was actually something that they signed, but they were talking about sitting out if Robinson played and that whole thing.
No, the petition was real.
The petition was real. Okay. So yeah, they signed this petition. It very much speaks to, which is something that's very true today still, not just about racial things, but people are just wary of change, and any difference will be pushed back against in established scenarios. I think what maybe is rose tinted about this is that in most of the scenes where we get the most obvious forms of racism, shortly after we get a white character who's one of the good ones who encounters Jackie Robinson. So for example, when he gets kicked out of the game by the cop, which I imagine is probably a scene that happened, and from reading about it, there were some teams that would reschedule games because of things and just doing a lot of stuff to not allow him to play on their fields. He gets kicked out of this place, And then supposedly a random white guy who lives in the same area with all these racist white people is just like, hey, we're rooting for you, man. And it's kind of a tense moment where he thinks this guy might be coming up to him and his wife to confront them. So it's just like the average white person in the first few weeks of Robinson playing for the Dodgers, feel like that maybe wasn't happening in the way that it's shown. And it seems a little bit convenient and maybe comfortable for the white viewers today to be like, there were people who cared back then. There were, a lot of people who cared back then. Branch Rickey being obviously the main one. So he can, after Alan Tudyk goes into him, Branch Rickey is there to comfort him, which is, I think, the most egregious, although the most cinematic, like you said, the Oscar bait moment where he needs Branch Rickey to go on playing, where Branch Rickey is very much like his emotional support and pushing him forward in a way that maybe isn't fair to the reality of how tough Jackie Robinson was and what he endured.
Right.
And is a bit of putting Branch Rickey on this, a bit of white savior pedestal. So I think that's the Branch Rickey stuff is kind of maybe the most potentially hagiographic, trying to put him on this pedestal. But thinking more about it, this isn't necessarily about the racism, but this idea of getting across to racists using monetary profits. It's something that he starts the movie saying, basically selling the integration to people this way of, there are all these black people who want to pay to watch baseball. Why wouldn't we, put people who look like them to play baseball?
I'm trying to win a World Series, and I got to tell you,
and he
there
wants
are
the best players.
Really talented people in the Negro League that
right.
can play baseball, and I think can give a run for money for half the people on my team.
So yes, and that's a monetary incentive as well, right? That apparently I think you make money it sounded like you make money when you win the pennant as well as the World Series. So they're trying to do good for the team. On top of this, the first time Chadwick Boseman stands up for himself against a racist white person is the guy at the gas station. Mm-hmm. And he says, we'll get our 90 gallons elsewhere. So he's using the money to be allowed to use the bathroom. So it's kind of this like weird, almost mixed message thing.
But it's true to Jackie Robinson. And I'm sorry to interrupt, Brian, but I will just say that Jackie Robinson had that view of Branch Rickey. If you watch interviews with him, he said, I was only able to do this because he gave me a chance. And he also, and again, this is just an ideological battle, but he was very critical of Malcolm X because I would say that this movie is very much about a reformer, not about a revolutionist. And I think in the current moment we're at, there's a lot of revolutionists, and I'm not going to take sides to any point of how people view how to fix even the racial problems we have to this day. But I will say that Jackie Robinson himself was a reformer, and the movie's about him. And for all intents and purposes, that's what he did. Now, there's some problematic stuff. Like Jackie Robinson, from what I was seeing, probably was instrumental in kind of leading to the war on drugs through the tragedy of his son had a drug problem, went to rehab, got better, and then died. But Jackie Robinson still had a passion in him towards the later part of his life on getting people off of even smoking marijuana or smoking anything, and probably was very instrumental in Jackie Robinson was a Republican. And, so there are lines where you see where probably not even the spirit of who he was as a person kind of went down this other path. But I think as for the movie, it is talking about how you can work in a system to fix things and what it takes to do that versus what it takes to destroy a system and rebuild better.
Yes. Right. And to his credit, Branch Rickey does this. And then I think 11 weeks into the season, another team drafted a black player. Mm-hmm. So, and it was just like,
floodgates.
Obviously the floodgates were open and it's widely integrated now. I'm looking at this critically in terms of who is the hero of the movie. And I think the hero of the movie is kind of Branch Rickey, which is a little bit weird in a movie called 42, the Jackie Robinson story.
I think you got this wrong, man.
Really?
The hero's baseball.
Okay. All right. That might be true. All right. Okay. I can appreciate that.
And to be clear, and this may play into personal beliefs, but it is saying that systems can work if we push them hard enough. There is a thing of saying like America.
If there's
baseball.
money to be made.
Well, and again, the money thing is a part of the system, right? So
right.
these people that want to push for change use the system in a way that fixes it, which is directly opposed. That's why you were telling me that Spike Lee was like in runnings to make this, and I think that is the wrong.
In development since the 90s, or trying to be in development, I think since the 90s with multiple people. Yeah,
which I think is interesting, and I'm not saying I don't want to see that movie. I really want to see that movie because this movie is about a reformer, not a revolutionist, and Spike Lee himself is definitely more leaning towards the we need revolution side. So seeing him talk about someone who was a prominent black Republican figure, historically, as we know how that history has gone, who worked inside a system and made partnerships with people that were inside the other half of the system and make it work. I think it would have been very interesting, but I would say that definitely an interesting part of American history. That's all I have to say for talking about these things. And I think at the end of the day, if I'm going to give away like kind of my beliefs, which are very limited and clearly, as the listeners can see, not a man who grew up as an oppressive part. I guess the worst that would be called is like a WAP or something. But I was born in the 90s, so that wasn't a thing anymore. I think both are viable options towards change. So I am someone who goes like, these movies still make me happy because they make me more hopeful, because revolutions are usually pretty bloody. So reform isn't always a bad thing, right, Brian?
No, yeah, I think it's hopeful in that way. And to your point about, I didn't know that he was against Malcolm X, but he was a very stark opponent. He said he was too militant and too radical. He was one of those. No, I'm not questioning it. I believe you. I'm just saying, I think it actually makes sense with the comparisons to, and obviously this was before MLK and Malcolm X were on the scene. This is in the 40s, but Branch Rickey telling him, I need someone strong enough to not fight back.
Yeah,
right.
No, it's very very Martin Luther King Jr.
Very MLK, right? So I think that is very strong. And in terms of the elements that still ring true, there's peaceful movements are extremely powerful, and in this country, especially after that, have influenced generations to come. So I think it's doing a lot there. And I'm sorry to pseudo like hate on this movie, because it really is an enjoyable ride. But I don't know. I feel like my critiques maybe aren't fair. So
no, I think they're absolutely fair. I'm only here to just have a difference of opinion. Not because I necessarily, like I said, when it comes to these things, I don't think it's ever as simple as, the only thing I'm arguing for the movie, I think, is that it's true to Jackie Robinson. That's what I would say. Yeah. And I
think that seems to be true from what I've seen and what you've told me as well. Yeah.
From when we were watching it, I remember texting you like, oh, it's so cliche. I love it. It's like all these things of recognition of how it can feel just a little too neat. But, in kind of as I was thinking about this movie, I recently painted my nails black. I didn't want to draw attention to it. I didn't do it for any other reason other than I wanted to treat my fiance to a mani-pedi. I've had one before. I got the clear, where it's just your natural nail color. And I was just bored. So I said, I'll paint it black. I had a rock show coming up. And I was like, it'll be cool to have black fingernails, Green Day vibes. And what I realized is when I talk to older family members and people from a different generation, it sparked this conversation about how society...
Homophobia?
I'm not even going to say that. It was purely about where society is and like what's okay. And this isn't, what's right. And it wasn't like that big of a deal. No one like gave me that much shit. But there was this... There were... Even just like this shit just sparked this fear of change.
Culture these days, am I right? These kids.
I'm telling you what. And because again, we referenced it at the very beginning when I texted you this Bill Burr sketch, Get Out of the Pool, because he's like, I'm sick of seeing the same movie. It's like they were the first black swim team. Get out of the pool. Very. I don't know why Jerry Seinfeld's the guy getting him out. But, you see these things and it feels so cliche. And then it's like a white guy comes up and be like, you're okay with me, dude.
But then, you see it actually happen. And
you see it with
you can't help get caught up in it a bit. It's like, okay, wow, this is
I mean,
This is
look at.
heartwarming.
I mean, again, and I swear to God, we are. I try. Listen, I'm not part of the woke leftist elite. All right, don't get scared of me. Don't get scared of me, viewers. But I'm sorry, we see it with trans athletes right now. We see it with like trans people. Is people just being like, they're not real people. Like, get them out of the sport. You know,
I hadn't thought about it that way, but they're always going to have an inherent
advantage.
Inherent advantage. This is the same arguments, right? Wow.
It's the exact same thing, and that's why, like, watching it and seeing all this ridiculous stuff that we consider ridiculous, we're like, yeah, I don't think me or Brian are denying that there are true bigotry people. I mean, we had your friend on earlier for when we were talking about another movie where she had a direct experience of like this type of racism, of just straight out bigotry.
Oh yeah, when Durocher was on.
Yeah, she had
on a school trip.
Very, very powerful story about that happening. So that still is happening. I'm not diminishing that, but
that was on our Malcolm X episode. If you guys want to check that out.
Absolutely, actually, very tight tie-in right there. When and so when a bunch of black athletes take the field today, they don't get booed for being black. It just doesn't happen, right? And that's
unless they're kneeling, right?
Unless
like
they
you said.
Oh God, exactly. Well, try to pay.
Peaceful protest, right? People still
the non-violent thing whatsoever because they hate America because they want change. God damn it. Anyway, I'm sorry. Yeah. Anyway, the point is that at least when someone of a different color of race takes the field, they don't automatically get booed anymore. That's something that's changed in this country for the better, regardless of what you think. It's for the better. Well, I hope you don't think it's not for the better. Then stop watching this podcast, you racist. But that doesn't happen. But when someone kneels, yeah, we see this difference, right? And so it's still there. And then also all the hate you see online, and even with like super popular, like love him or hate him, Joe Rogan, like very popular voices, talking out against trans people and like coding it, right? Be like, well, I don't have a problem with trans people. It's fine. They just can't play sports.
No, you listen to enough Rogan and it becomes like that's a common talking point. He's got some problematic views about Islam. He has his standards that he falls back on.
And I think that's like always should be in our foreground of like, what sounds like Alan Tudyk in the 40s?
Where's that person now?
Yeah. And I think that's where some people's sentiments lie. And so although you can look at this and being too idealistic and all this stuff, but things like sports, things like current systems can change that, right? When people see athletes in this way or see in a thing that they like, athletes see these stories that move people actually start to change things. And hopefully we get that in the trans community. As someone who has a few trans friends, I see that right now from where they're at. So it still exists, and I think it's still relevant, and it's relevant. It's even relevant to race, like we said with the kneeling, which isn't even at this point. I mean, it's obviously the point they're trying to make is racially based, but look at the women's soccer team, getting shit on by half of this country for kneeling during the national anthem, and being hated for it. So I still think we're dealing with the same stuff, right?
People gatekeeping and trying to hold down people who are historically oppressed, right?
And the reason that the women's soccer league won't change anything is that it's soccer and it's not baseball.
I think we need a Bill Burr directed movie about an up and coming soccer team.
Get out of the net. Yeah. Brian, I think we've talked about a lot of great things with this movie. Any final thoughts on 42?
I think if you're unfamiliar with Jackie Robinson, as far as biopics go, this is going to give you a relatively straightforward and, for the most part, accurate depiction of the beginning of his career and the first season he played with the Dodgers. It also has a bunch of great actors doing the best they can with the script, which is not phenomenal, but undeniably a good time. And like we both agreed, a hopeful message, even if it may be a bit rose-colored at times.
Brian, you said exactly what I was going to say. I think we've landed in the same position. I'm not right in the middle. Wow.
Agreement.
What a difference two white people can make in the world. Am I right, Brian?
Let's yeah, we could do more.
We could always do more. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I really enjoy this movie, but I also like Remember the Titans, and I know exactly what kind of movie this is. I think you know what kind of movie this is just by the cinematography. It's very like, it's very like big Hollywood. It's great. It's a certain type of film. If you're looking to feel good, it's a good time.
Let's just bring it back. Chadwick Boseman. This is early in his career. It was so clear that he was a star. You know, it's very obvious.
Yeah, and like he goes toe to toe with I think
Harrison Ford.
He kind of runs circles around him as far as like, hey man, take it back a bit.
Tone it down a couple notches.
Harrison Ford could take some notes, but I love Harrison Ford in it. It's actually one of my favorite Harrison Ford roles.
He's definitely, like you said earlier, he's definitely doing something that you don't see him do often.
Yeah, and he's like fully in it. Like he looks like he gives a shit, which is But to bring it back to Chadwick, yeah, it's like he's clearly like one of the best parts of this movie. He elevates the material just by being present. I think he really adds a lot to this, and yeah, I'm excited to dive more into this month because I really don't. I haven't seen a lot of his catalog outside of the MCU stuff, so
same.
I'm more than excited. If he can make this turd sing, not that it's a turd.
Yeah, I was like, wow, you're going against your review now.
No, I mean it's not a great movie, Brian. I just like it a lot.
Okay.
I think it has some pretty big gaps in it being like, yeah, this is like high-minded art here. Don't misconstrue me. I think Chadwick's really great in it though, so I appreciate it. So that'll do it for 42. It is available right now on HBO Max. So if you made it through this whole thing, you can check it out there. Brian, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at TruePopaholic.
You can find me in my band at Midnight Satire. Search Apple Music and Spotify, any listening device or streaming service you have. You can even buy stuff if you are so inclined on Bandcamp, midnightsatire.bandcamp.com. Brian, what do we have coming up next week?
Next week, we are covering Get On Up, which is from 2014.
James Brown, Jackie Robinson,
Chadwick Boseman playing some of the greats.
Oh my goodness. This movie will be disappointing if it doesn't have that interview that he had. It's like a daytime talk show. He's like, satelliting in. Do you know the video I'm talking about where he's like super high on cocaine?
He's sweating and yeah.
He goes, I'm out of love.
It's not a high point.
After you YouTube the Bill Burr sketch, YouTube the just type in James Brown.
I saw this for the first time recently. It's funny you bring this up.
James Brown interview. It's one of the best interviews. He is recently divorced, I believe, super high on cocaine, and sweating his ass off.
He's nearly at Hobbs level of drenched.
Ends it with shouting out like a church, an evangelical church gathering or something where he sobers up very quickly. It's a very good interview. But we're going to be talking about the movie where Chadwick Boseman portrays James Brown. And like I said, if that interview is not in it, it's going to get 2 big thumbs down from me.
Missed opportunity.
Got a high hill to climb. I'm out of love! So follow us for the Popaholics. You can follow us on all the social medias. If you're watching the YouTube video, we got a link down in the description. If you're listening on the audio form, in the show notes, there is a thing that says, check us out all over the web. That's got links to YouTube, podcast feed, social media, all that stuff. We'd love for you to join in the conversation. We really want to hear from you. popaholicscast@gmail.com for your questions, comments, concerns. What did you think of 42? Did you think it was too rose-colored? Did you think it worked well? What do you think of Chadwick Boseman? What's your favorite Chadwick Boseman film? We want to know. We might have a poll too relating to something like that, and that you can find on Twitter. So thanks for joining in, Brian. I really appreciate you holding it down. Chris, go fuck yourself. You weren't here today. Me and Brian.
Chris, we miss you. Come back.
I don't know, Brian. I think we did a pretty good job without the guy.
We held it down, but it's not the same.
We did hold it down, and It is not the same. Is it better? Let us know at popboxcast@gmail.com. See if you want us to boot Chris off the podcast. Just keep in mind, if we do that, you will not have any cool graphics for anything.
It will never be animation.
And the social media will be completely dead because Christian refuses to log into the Popaholics at anything and participate in social media. So Chris and Brian really bearing the cross there. But I will read your comments or your emails if you send them. I promise Chris will let me know you did that, and I will see it or something. I don't know. Catch us next week on